This video is sponsored by Ground News. In today's video, we're going to have a little bit of fun. A review of every election in the EU last year. Okay, well, not every election. We're ignoring the local ones and the regional ones, and focusing solely on national parliamentary elections and second-round presidential ones. And the most exciting part, at the very end of the video, we're going to do something very ambitious. We'll crown the overall European winner and European loser to see whether right-wing, left-wing, or centrist parties had the best year in 2025. So, let's kick things off with Germany, who went to the polls in February last year. And Friedrich Merz's center-right union came out on top, followed by the far-right AfD, and then the center-left SPD. Merz pretty much wanted to become chancellor since forever. But Merkel kinda stole his thunder for 16 years straight. So we have to say, well done Merz. The AfD also had a great result. In fact, it was their best ever. And Die Linke surged to a record 64 seats as well. And this was largely driven by young voters. Among 18 to 24-year-olds, almost half voted for either the AfD or Die Linke, which I found crazy. Now, as for the losers, without any doubt, it's the SPD, who suffered one of the worst results in their history. They went from first place with Chancellor Scholz all the way down to third. Seems like people were not happy with this chancellorship. The centrist FDP should also be mentioned, as they fared so badly that they didn't even make it into parliament after failing to hit the 5% threshold. As a result, today Germany is run by a grand coalition of the Union and SPD. But they have such a razor-thin majority, and the trust in the government is so low. So honestly, who knows if they'll last the full 4 years. Now, to figure out a 2025 European election winner, we need to do a bit of EU magic and group the national parties into their European political families. So, for example, the Union hangs out with the EPP in the European Parliament, and the AfD sits with the ESN. And once you do that, you can compare seats across Europe, not just in Germany. And you'll see exactly what I mean in a second when we move over to Portugal. Portugal went to the polls in May, and here the center-right Social Democratic Party won the election, governing as part of the AD alliance. But Czechia are also major winners here. Like the AfD, they delivered their best result ever, and they are now a permanent force in Portuguese politics. And as for losers, without a doubt, again, just like in Germany, the Socialist Party. They were punished so hard after corruption scandals and voter fatigue, collapsing very hard from their previous majority. In the end, Portugal got a minority-center government, led by Luís Montenegro. Congrats! But without a coalition, the government survives on issue-by-issue support, which makes it oh so fragile. For example, the socialists had to abstain to allow the 2026 budget to pass. Now, let's go back to the overview, with a total tally of seats across European political families. And if we add in the Portuguese parties, the picture changes. The EPP, SD, and Patriots are the ones gaining most new seats. And interestingly, the Patriots and SD move up a spot in our rankings. Which means Viktor Orban, who I'm sure is watching this video, is probably popping his first victory beer. Now, before we continue to Czechia, it's not just political parties that lean either left or right. The news that you read does this too. Take this article about the current foreign policy debate around Greenland. You'd expect most outlets to tell a broadly similar story. But when you compare 265 news articles, something really interesting happens. Left-leaning coverage generally frames Trump's interest in Greenland as threats and an imperialist offensive. On the other hand, right-leaning outlets barely focus on Greenland at all, instead celebrating a successful Maduro raid in Venezuela and dismissing critics as TDS sufferers in hysterics. That last one actually made me laugh a bit. But all jokes aside, these are two completely different narratives about the same moment in global politics. And that very difference, not from politicians, but from the news coverage itself, is exactly where Ground News becomes oh so useful. Their platform lets you see how the same story is covered across the entire political spectrum, so you don't just get stuck inside one narrative. And you can even check your blind spots, stories that are basically underreported in your political bubble. For example, this story from Gaza has not been reported at all by right-leaning outlets. If you'd like to give it a try yourself, you can get 40% off the Vantage plan using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on the screen. Alright, back to the video and on to Czechia, who voted in October last year. The right-wing populist ANO won the election and reclaimed the first place after losing it back in 2021. Motorista also had a great night. They pretty much started as a single-issue movement, driven by angry car owners, especially in Prague. And now they entered parliament for the very first time with 13 seats. On the other side, after 4 years in government, Spolu lost very badly. They were hit by voter fatigue, internal infighting, and so many frustrations over high prices and slow reforms. And voters clearly punished them. As a result, the country is now run by an ANO-led coalition, together with Freedom and Direct Democracy and Motorista, with Andrej Babiš back as the prime minister. So, I think you get the idea. Let's zoom back out to our European political families and see how the picture changes. Once again, the Patriots make massive gains and move up to 4th place. And now we get to the final parliamentary election in the Netherlands, my very home country, which took place in October last year. And yes, there are so many parties for such a small country. Nonetheless, it was quite an incredible result, because the liberal center-left D66 surged into first place, gaining 17 seats and just edging out Geert Wilders by a mere 0.3% of the vote. And honestly, this was a massive moment for centrists, who've been losing ground almost everywhere else in Europe. And even though he came in second, Wilders was the main loser of the night. His party lost 11 seats compared to the last vote. And at first glance you might think that this looks like a major defeat for the far right. But parties like Ja21 and Forum for Democracy, which share part of Wilders' ideology, actually gained seats. So it was more of a reshuffle than a complete ideological change. And when we look at the European political families again, the biggest winners here are clearly Renew Europe. The Netherlands really remains the last major stronghold of centrist politics in Europe. The Patriots also move up though, and this time overtaking the even more extreme ESN. But before we crown any overall winners, there's one more thing we need to factor in. We still have to look at the 4 presidential elections. And first up here, we had Croatia. The winner here was Zoran Milanovic, associated with the center-left Social Democratic Party, who won the runoff with around 75% of the vote. Very impressive. Then we had Romania. Nico Șordan, a centrist, liberal and pro-EU candidate, won the presidency here with roughly 54%. Then Poland. Karol Nawrocki, aligned with the right-wing nationalist Law and Justice camp, narrowly won with just under 51% of the vote. And finally, there was Ireland. Catherine Connolly, an independent with left-wing and social democratic backing, won very decisively with about 63% of the vote. So now we can slot these 4 results again into our European political families map as well. And Croatia boosts the Social Democrats, Romania strengthens the Renew Europe, Poland adds to the ECR, and Ireland goes to the left. And tada, we finally have it, the full picture for 2025. So, who actually won? Now at first glance, the clear winner appears to be the center-right EPP, who still holds the most seats. But if we look a little closer, you see that the EPP barely gained any additional seats at all. By contrast though, both far-right groups gained significantly, especially the ESN, largely because of AfD's surge in Germany. And on that basis alone, it's really hard to avoid the conclusion that the far right is the real winner of this election cycle. So, that brings us to the losers. And at first glance, Renew Europe looks badly battered. But this impression is a little misleading, because much of Renew's losses are driven by the total collapse of the FDP in Germany. If you strip that out, Renew actually held up very well, helped by a massive resurgence in the Netherlands. That really only leaves us with the Social Democrats. And to be honest, the picture here is super bleak. Aside from the presidential win in Croatia, they're losing ground everywhere. Just take a look at this map, which shows who is currently leading in the polls in each European country. And here, only Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Malta are in red, meaning that they remain under Social Democratic control. So, what do I think about last year's election results? Well, I'm super glad you asked. And as viewers of the channel know, what I care most about are pro-European parties. Parties that genuinely want a deeper European integration, especially in areas like foreign policy, defense, and completing the single market. And to be very, very honest with you, last year has not been great for that. The Polish presidential election and especially the Czech parliamentary election were particularly disappointing, especially because Orban now has a friend in Babiš, who is aligned with many of Orban's anti-EU ideas. That said though, there are some reasons for optimism, and that's especially true in the Netherlands, where the D66 won the election. And to be honest, you couldn't have a more pro-European party. They call for a United States of Europe, a European army, a completed single market, and basically the whole European integration project. And this really is a 180-degree turn away from Wilders' previous policies. And if Hungary manages to finally vote Orban out when it goes to the polls in April, which is looking likely, then the broader picture could start looking much, much brighter again. So please, Hungary, come on, get it done. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know who you think the 2025 European election winners are. And if you want to dig deeper into media bias and understand how stories are being framed, really do check out our sponsor, Ground News. You can get the Unlimited Access Vantage plan with 40% off by using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on the screen. And thank you to our presidents, Jan Schauke Christian Peter Alexander, Daniel Eupedia HEVD, Kiki Loxen Rashid Stefan, Unite Europe, Ava Europa, J and Europe, and our newest president, Clement. Thank you so much for supporting us.